Have you ever wondered why some of history's most brilliant and impactful Black visionaries and achievers remain hidden from mainstream narratives? What if I told you that their stories hold the keys to a more inclusive, harmonious, and enlightened future? Welcome to Black Achievements and Their Resounding Impact on Society. We're your hosts, and today we'll embark on an electrifying journey through history to uncover the hidden gems and remarkable contributions of Black visionaries who have shaped our world in profound ways. In this discussion, we celebrate the unsung heroes and shine a spotlight on those whose incredible achievements have often been overlooked or overshadowed. These Black trailblazers have composed the symphony of progress, innovation, and cultural enrichment, leaving an incredible mark on society that resonates far beyond their lifetimes. So prepare to be enlightened, inspired, and empowered as we explore the invisible composers whose resounding impact continues to shape our world for the better. So don't forget, again, go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and share this with people that you know, love, and care about. And again, by all means, put your comments in the chat because your contribution matters. Now, gentlemen, what I want to do is kind of get this conversation started, right? Because we've been, they've been given a homework assignment. Everybody, I'm gonna put it out there. We gave them a homework assignment last week, and so everybody kind of did their own little research. So I want to kind of put it out there first. The first question that I want to ask, and this is just so that we can get everybody caught up to speed with the things that we uncovered, is I want you to please share your example of your achiever whose story resonates with you. And can you guys hear me? Okay.
We can now.
Are you hear me for a minute? Oh man.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry. Well, here's the question. I'm sorry. Please share a powerful example of your Black achievers whose story resonates with you and explain how their achievements have impacted your perspective on history and social justice.
You know what? I'll go first because mine is short. My example was Muhammad Ali, the champ. He stood on his square. I honestly believe that if they would have called him Muhammad Ali when he got enlisted, he would have gone. But they didn't call him by his name. And he stood on that and he wound up winning that case. On top of that, he went through all types of adversity to he couldn't fight. He couldn't do the one thing that he loved. They stripped the belt from him because couldn't nobody whoop him. You understand what I'm saying? Like he did a lot. And that right there, the more I the more I read about him and the more footage that I watched of him, I even rewatched the movie Ali. I rewatched the movie Ali, and the more I looked into that, I'm like, all right, it's cool. It's cool to stand on your square, but I have to also understand that there are going to be adversities that come with standing on your square, even when because sometimes standing on your square goes against the narrative, and it goes against what people actually think you should be doing instead of what you know deep in your gut is right. So yeah, the champ, and he's the only boxer. He's still regarded as the greatest boxer that ever lived. And he's the only boxer to be called champ, even when he wasn't the champ. So yeah, Muhammad Ali, the champ. The champ is here.
Very
Damn
good.
right.
I like that. I like that. All right, who's next?
I go, let the two youngest ones jump out there first, let those who lived a little more history, tell us a better story. I'm
Wow.
joking. I love my brothers. Uh now so mine is not really so far in history. I'm going to deal with a woman that I actually know. Her name is Pamela A. Smith. As I was growing up, right, she was a young lady. She was our young adult choir director, and she became a minister at our church when I was young, and she was a parks police officer. She made history by becoming the first Black African American woman to be announced as chief of the U.S. Parks Police overall. Um, And I believe a year or two ago, she retired from the Federal Parks Police and became deputy chief uh, in the District of Columbia, and was just recently announced as the first African American woman, second woman ever to be announced as the chief of the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia. So, and I chose her because I'm not, pro anti police or what have you, but when I went back and I listened to some of her interviews, of course, I was intrigued when I saw the news because I know this woman. She invested in my life when I was a troubled teen. She took me in when I was out there wearing baggy clothes. She took me and bought some pants that fit, and I kind of hated her for it for a few minutes. Uh, I, I I was in that era. We liked our pants saggy, or baggy, and so when I'm listening to her talk about how she wants to and involve some type of community enhancement projects within her department to deal with the young men and young women in the community. She already has a program in place. It's like, personally, I know her, and not too many people that you can vouch for in positions like that says what she's talking about she stands on. Because since I was a teenager, uh 20 something years ago, she was in the community. She was that person who invested her time. Everybody I know from that youth department speaks to her as if she was a mother to them, you know, because she invested her time and her energy outside of her job with the young people in the community. And I dare I say, help change some of our lives for the better. So that's who I picked. Chief Pamela A. Smith of the Metropolitan DC Police Department.
I like
I
it.
oh, who did you say? Did you
No,
ask
go
for
ahead.
Willie?
You good? No, you good.
Um, well, I'm a fan of comedy, so I went with somebody in comedy. At least that's where they started off as, and that was Dick Gregory. What's funny is when we were little, I guess this was before I knew it. When I was a kid, people used to walk around. If somebody lose weight, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, he on that Dick Gregory," but it was like there was on sort of some juice or something like that. So there was just a running joke, when we were kids and stuff like that. So during the pandemic, I saw some videos, and then I kind of got real. I think it was on the Breakfast Club. I saw a interview with Dick Gregory, and I don't know, for months I was just like all into every all of his content and everything that he talked about. Um, and I don't know, man. Like, I guess for me, because he started off in comedy, like I didn't realize that he had ran for president or anything like that. So it was like, when I had heard that, that was interesting because when we think about black presidents, we always think Barack Obama, but um I like I said, I found out that this comedian, Dick Gregory, this dude had ran for president at one time. So it was real interesting. And I guess like how he impacted and how things work now is he was one of the first comedians that kind of got kind of mainstream. So he is part of the reason he is one of the people and the pioneers of comedy who set the stage so we can watch Cat Williams on Club Shay Shay.
What you got, Will?
Man, they came with some power hitters. I'm going with someone that I actually know, actually have a relationship with, and he's actually younger than me. But because of the impact that he's made in the community that I grew up in Detroit, uh, and he went a different route, is Marv Neal. Marv Neal is a four-time award-winning stylist. And when we hear stuff like stylist, oh, he in the fashion. Marv is from the hood, but he's in the styling people. He's styled multiple celebrities, whether it be Tony Braxton, Little Mo, even one of the Pistons, Jalen Durant. He styles these people, and he's in videos. He's styled for TV shows like BMF, various TV shows, and he's been in a lot of magazines and so forth and so on. But where it gets me is Marv, even though he's moving up the ladder in the style game, in the fashion game, Marv still goes back to the neighborhood. He still talks to the youth. He still impacts them in a way to let them know you don't have to do like everybody else does. You don't have to play sports. You don't have, whatever your passion is, follow your passion, follow your goals, and you can get out of this situation. But when you get out, your job is to go back, not just to hang around, but to go back and show the youth that they can make it too. And they don't have to do it the same way everybody else does. So you can make money doing this, or you can, if you love it and it's in you and it's your passion, you will find a way to make money doing it and to show other people that, hey, you can do this because I did it. And simply because I've done this, I'm giving you a blueprint to say, hey, Black excellence comes in many different ways and many facets of life.
All right, very good. Definitely appreciate that. So I want to make sure I'm tracking you guys, people. So I got Muhammad Ali, Pamela A. Smith, Dick Gregory, and Marv Neal. And I think all of those are excellent choices. I actually have two. I'm going to start off with Septima Poinsett Clark. Now I'm gonna put a video in the link because if I play it, it will won't be good for me to play it. But I want to put a video in the chats here, that way you guys can check it out. And that video is actually a video by Jim Clyburn, who was actually talking about her. And so if you've never heard of Septima Poinsett Clark, she is often referred to. I tell you what, I'm not going to tell you what she's referred to. If you've ever heard of her, just kind of put like her nickname on what she was referred to in the chat. But she was a pivotal figure in the struggle for civil rights and education equality in the United States. She was born May 3rd, 1898 in Charleston, South Carolina, and was the second of 8 children in her family. She grew up, of course, in the segregated South and experienced firsthand inequalities faced by African Americans in education and society. She became a teacher, and so she taught in rural South Carolina, where she witnessed the disparities in education between Black and white schools. Despite facing obstacles due to her race and gender, she was dedicated to providing quality education to African American students. She was also a civil rights activist. She became increasingly involved with civil rights activism, particularly through her work with the NAACP. She worked to challenge the segregation laws and fought for voting rights for African Americans in the South. One of her most significant contributions to the civil rights movement was her role in developing and implementing citizenship schools. These schools were established to teach literacy and civic education to African Americans who were denied access to education due to segregation laws. She believed that education was essential for empowering individuals to participate fully in society and advocate rights. One of her biggest impacts, collection of her impacts, was the Citizenship School, which Clark helped to organize in collaboration with the Highlander Folk School, which is in, if I recall correctly, in Tennessee. That was one of the projects that she was called upon by Martin Luther King to actually help spearhead in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She also played a crucial role in empowering African Americans to become active participants in the civil rights movement. And her legacy extends beyond her work with the Citizenship School. She was a mentor and an inspiration to many civil rights activists, including Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Her tireless efforts to promote education, literacy, and social justice continue to inspire generations of activists. So she is the first one I want to bring to the table because she is like a huge a huge piece behind the scenes based upon what we're seeing. We see a lot about the Martin Luther King Jr. and a lot of his movement, but what we don't realize is that behind the scenes, that's where she did a heavy lift. Absolutely, Miss Austin. Thank you. She was considered the mother of the movement, and in some cases, Queen Mother. So yes, absolutely. So she was a huge piece, and if you were like me, right, you probably never heard of her. She probably never got the recognition for several different reasons. One reason because of her skin color. The second reason because she was a woman during that era. And unfortunately, a lot of women did not get recognized because of the work that they did. When I say it was a lot of work being done in civil rights that we don't know about, it's a lot. So I just kind of want to drop that one. And then I want to drop my second one. My second one is Mr. Victor Hugo Green. And so if I start talking about him, you're gonna already know who he is. But he was an African American from around Gatti Hood, right? So he's from New York, but he was a postal worker, and he was largely known for inventing the Green Book. So if you ever heard of the Green Book, he is the creator of the Green Book. And if you ever seen the movie is awesome, but it doesn't really dive into the details behind why it's called the Green Book. But it still is a good movie. But so Victor Green, again, born in 1892 in New York City, grew up in Harlem. And in 1936, inspired by his own experiences of encountering discrimination and limited accommodations while traveling, Green published the first edition of the Green Book. The Green Book was a travel guide specifically designed for African American motorists, providing information about safe places to eat, sleep, and refuel while traveling in the racially segregated United States. The Green Book was created to help African American travelers navigate the challenges of segregation and discrimination during the Jim Crow era. So, if you're familiar with the Jim Crow era, you also understand what was happening during that era. That's kind of like what made the Green Book so significant. It listed hotels, restaurants, gas stations, and other businesses that welcomed Black customers, allowing travelers to plan their trips and avoid potentially dangerous or inhospitable situations. Over the years, the Green Book grew in popularity and became an indispensable resource for African American travelers across the country. It was updated annually and expanded to include listings in cities and towns across the United States, as well as information about tourist attractions and historical sites. So, that being said, the Green Book played a crucial role in facilitating travel and mobility for African Americans during a time entrenched in racism and segregation. So, again, just want to kind of drop those two pieces out there because, again, when you start looking at Septima Clark and everything that she did, and I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And then when you look at somebody such as Victor Green and how influential his body of work was to the African American community during that time, we have to conclude that these are people that most people aren't going to celebrate during Black History Month, right? And you're not going to hear them talking about them. But again, these are people that should be celebrated. So before we move on, are there any other questions or concerns about any of the people that we discussed so far? And I'm sure we're going to uncover some more.
I want to know the guy who did the Green Book. What was his name again?
Victor Hugo Green.
All right, Victor Hugo Green. I wonder if anybody knows, is there something like that today? Not necessarily that goes to that like safe places, but I've heard of some people that they want to buy Black. You know what I mean? So is that something that has evolved into something like that, or do we have like a new or current edition of something like that? And I guess I don't know if it's the same thing or if it's in line with it, but I was just thinking, if there's something out there like that where people can look at a book or an internet and see where, if I'm going from my house to Texas to go visit Rome, visit Roland, excuse me, can I map out and only go to Black-owned businesses along the way? So I was just wondering.
Now, I know I have come across a community on social media at one point. It was a while back. Actually, Roland didn't introduce me to it, but me and Roland was talking some time back, talking about Black businesses. And I don't know if Roland remember, but we were doing, my niece was here and me and you was talking about how we can, try to help assist each other when it comes to money and supporting businesses. And I saw something like that you're looking for, but I don't think they associated it with the Green Book. But I have seen that people have done an update to I guess you would say to the Green Book idea, where they have created modern sundown towns listings for people who travel across the country by motor. Because I think it was more intended now, more so because there's a lot more black truckers than there used to be. And so I know they created something like that for them. I don't know exactly what it's called, but there are things out there, and there are communities out there that have created these things. So we just got to go find them and share them with each other.
Yeah, I am. So, I mean, I'm unaware of that specifically, but I am sure that there's. Oh, well, let me back up. So there is and it's kind of off topic, but it's not. There is a Netflix series that, and it's it was made by Killer Mike, believe it or not, and he was doing, like, no joke, he was trying to do exactly what you're talking about. So he had a show in Athens. He was trying to go from Atlanta to Athens, and he decided for 3 straight days that he was only going to keep his money in the community. Period. So it had to be produced, developed, created, and sold by Black people.
Was that the same series that he did when he interviewed what is it, Cleflo Dollar?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think the first episode, he was in that time span, the 3 days he struggled. He struggled trying to eat, trying to find a place to go to sleep, like a hotel or whatever, get his hair cut, all of that stuff, simply because he could not find where there were Black owned businesses, Black owned products. And he even went to a restaurant, and it was a barbecue joint. And his manager that was with him, he said, "Man, this food is really good." But then it just dawned on him based upon the conversation that we was asking. So he called the owner. He said, "So the animals, did it come from a Black owned farm?" He said, "No." So he got a to go box. He couldn't eat it. So it's just stuff like that. Like, to your question, it is very difficult if a person decided to say, "Hey, I just want to keep our money recycling in the community." It is very difficult to do that. And I thought it was a very interesting statistic that he also shared, to where it was like different communities. In one community, I'm not going to call any per race, right? But one community, their money stayed in there for 6 days. Another community, I think it was like 5 days. And our community, it stayed in our community for 6 hours. That's it, 6 hours. So it's like, as soon as it comes in, it just goes out completely and almost immediately. So that was one of the things that, moved him to actually want to, do that. Now, my disclaimer: I am not promoting it for something to go look at, because I am here to tell you it is not something that everybody is going to want to see. However, there are some aspects in there, kind of like Chris brought up, that interview that he had with Creflo Dollar. I thought that was a very interesting conversation between the two of them. So if you just kind of like want to look at certain parts of it, I think that'd be a good view to kind of get after the question what you're asking. Ron, you about to say something, bro.
Yeah, because there is a bunch of websites out there. I remember a few years ago when we were looking for a Black-owned bank or credit union, the closest one here was a church-owned, Black church-owned, but you had to be a member. And, with that particular church, they wanted your information, like your W-2s and all this other stuff. And wasn't going to happen. And then this one in Houston that we're a part of. So you have like supportblackowned.com and what is it? If you go online and just type stuff in like that, you can find stuff, because we buy like soaps and toothpaste and toiletries and stuff from Black-owned organizations as well, because it recycles through the community. And I think sometimes what we do is we look at the pricing and we say, well, I don't want to pay this and I don't want to pay that, when you don't realize what it takes for them to get it out and push it out to us. So I'm not one that does that. And I try to support our people as much as possible. And that, because that's something that I know we all need to do. And it's not like I say, okay, I'm only doing this and I'm only doing that. I don't do that, especially in Killeen, Texas. You can't really do anything like that and survive. Because if you look for grocers and butchers and things of that sort, you're gonna starve.
Yeah, that's a good point. Michelle, great question. It's called Trigger Warning by Killer Mike, and it's on Netflix. It's more to the title, but the first part of it says Trigger Warning. But great question. Unless anybody have anything else, I kind of want to grab some of these points that are being made here in the chat because they're putting in some people of their own. It looks like let's start with Cassandra up top with Smith, Hammond, and Middleton, three students at South Carolina State University that stood against the blatant racists in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Their life was sacrificed for there we go, equality, treatment of black students. Their lives were lost in what is known as the Orangeburg Massacre. Yeah, thank you for that, Cassandra. That's something I'm interested in going and looking up. I'm trying to remember if it's the one I'm thinking about. But I'd definitely go look that up because I think that's interesting. Another point about South Carolina State, if you look at that link I put in there, like I said, that was by Jim Clyburn, who is of South Carolina. He went to South Carolina State, so just an interesting fun fact. But I mean, like, look at his story as well, because his story is not one for the faint at heart. And when you look at the seat that he is holding, look at the tenure he's been in that seat. So he's like third in command for his, I think, for the Democratic Party. So he worked directly behind Nancy Pelosi and whatever the case may be. So again, it's a lot of people out there that's living and that has passed along that has done some great work. So Michelle Ray says, Miss Hill, I think it's talking about Anita Hill. Anita Hill, lawyer, educator, and author, professor in social policy, law, and women's study. Her courage played a crucial role in bringing about heightened awareness of sexual harassment. Absolutely. And this is something that happened in most of our lifetime, not everybody. Most of our lifetimes, right? And some of us can even remember some of the things that actually went on during this, during her working with this particular Supreme Court justice. And you can only imagine like what type of scrutiny and how taxing it was for her to actually stand up to be the first person to be bold enough to say it has to stop with me. So thank you for sharing it. And if you haven't, it's a movie out about it as well. If you haven't seen the movie, go look at the movie because it's actually a pretty good movie. And I think Kerry Washington that plays in that movie? Whatever. Go see the movie. Who's next? So Miss Queen V says the woman behind the space program that was never acknowledged. They were my inspiration. They made an impact in history, and there was never any social justice for them. So you know what? The first time I heard about them is when I seen the movie. I'm just gonna be honest with you. What is Hidden Figures? That's the name of it. So if you've never seen Hidden Figures, go look at it. And Taraji P. Henson is in that as well. It's a great movie, very good movie, and it really brought to my awareness. So again, things we never knew about. So again, thank you for that. Let's see who else. Another individual is Julian Bond. I was a mentee of his during my college years, learned about how he began the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, his involvement in Georgia politics as well. So thank you for sharing that. So man, you guys are all over it. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Definitely appreciate that. So without further ado, what I want to do is kind of dive into a continual conversation. Again, I have to say this, right? We're just subject matter experts of our own perspective, right? We're not historians. We're not, documented activists, right? Some of us might be, but I'm just saying we're not documented activists, but so we are subject matter experts of our own perspective. So what we're doing is just sharing our perspective on what it could be like, potentially could have been like, or so forth and so on as it comes down to it. So that being said, what I want to do is ask this question for everybody here. And you don't have to limit it to just your person. We could talk about anybody that we talked about already or somebody else that you have in mind. So can you discuss the perceived challenges and obstacles that many of these Black achievers face during their pursuit of excellence?
The fact that everything can be taken away from them if they do not fall in line. That's the biggest challenge. The fear of being stripped of everything that you worked for because you made a wrong move or you made a wrong step or you said the wrong thing about the wrong event at the wrong time. That's one of the biggest challenges. And I honestly think that's why a lot of people nowadays don't say nothing because they're afraid of everything getting stripped from them, especially now with the internet. People are going back 10, 15 years to find something wrong that somebody said to cancel them. They're even trying to cancel dead people. You understand what I'm saying? So yeah, man, just the fact that one minor slip up that you might not even know was a slip up, or you actually being truthful in your gut could cause you to lose everything.
So do me a favor, let's, because you like, and you said Muhammad Ali, right? So, in your opinion, and again, he was very outspoken, very impressionable, and he did not bite his tongue. What do you think some of the concerns could have been? Or just kind of like imagine, because of course you didn't live during that era, neither either one of us, right? But imagine during the time when he was boxing in his prime, when he was fighting these guys and Joe Louis, so forth and so on, but he was outwardly spoken on camera, whatever the case may be. What were some of the obstacles that he could have went through?
Honestly, to be based on what I've read and what I've seen, he really he really didn't have any obstacles because he was so outspoken that people wanted to hear him talk, no matter how controversial he was. That's why he was on television so much. That's why you see so many videos about him. They wanted to hear this man talk, no matter how outlandish or crazy it was. The main thing that I saw was that the government didn't call him by his name when he went to go when he got drafted, and he was like, "Look, man, that's not my name, so I can't step forward because that's not my name. Yeah, the government might have given it to me, but I answer to a higher power, and that higher power gave me a different name. So you got to address me as that, just on some mutual respect stuff. You understand what I'm saying? So I don't think that he really faced any challenges aside from not knowing when to shut up. But even when he was talking, the more that I listened to him, the more where's the lie? That was the question that just kept popping in my head. Like, where's the lie?
Do you think it was done at a risk?
Yes, but I'm thinking base level because I'm thinking base level because to speak runs the risk of being offensive. So you see what I'm saying? Me opening my mouth and saying what I'm saying right now could be offending somebody in the chat, and I don't even know it.
Yeah.
So it's always a risk, but that's base level.
Gotcha.
I'll go next. Some of the I mean, this we're speaking about Dick Gregory. So back in the I'm speaking for like in the 60s. So back then, because of his, activism and his controversial sometimes things that he would talk about, when you're like that, you're not always marketable. So I think, it might have cost him probably some gigs, maybe some certain things in life, which I'm sure he was okay with it. But I also think that he struggled, I've heard this before, in doing some of the research that he struggled with trying to get, black people to become more healthy and live more healthier lifestyles and stuff like that. He, like I said, I joked about the whole Dick Gregory thing, but that was one of the things that he kind of fought for, and some of the things that he talked about was how black people need to be a lot more healthier and live healthier lifestyles. So I think anytime, even especially nowadays, when you bring up health, for a lot of people that can be a trigger. So and I understand back in the day when people were dealing with this, just like now, dealing with a lot of different things, and you can see the benefits of living a healthier lifestyle and how living healthier as an overall, as a people or as a group, can benefit everybody. So whenever you're trying to interject certain mindsets that or certain thoughts that people may not be okay with, it's going to cause some controversy, in which can create obstacles in trying to get more people to jump on board and live healthier lifestyles. So I think for me, some of the financial challenges, like I said, because of who he was and things that he talked about, but also with healthy living and healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
I would say looking at the overall picture of who Chief Smith was, being in law enforcement. Now I know that early on she started off in the Parks Police. I think she started as like a as a social worker, then a PO, then moved into Parks Police. But to be in a law enforcement program that we already understand is very male dominant, for one. So the odds of advancement for women are like one in 100, because that's like when I looked up, it was somewhere near that number. It's a little bit larger than that, but I'm just playing with it, right? For how many women there are out of every man, so the chance of advancement, slims. So that, and then on top of that, it's a program that we all know. Well, I would speak. I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for me growing up in the city. That that people who look like us are met with more hostility from law enforcement, because we're seen more as hostile and as a threat. As just by nature, that's how they think we're just naturally that way. So we're addressed more aggressively. So to know that, and to still outside of the badge be able and willing to personally mentor, help, and reach out to young people within the inner city, and be more active in the community without the badge on. I think that's a risk in and of its own. Because you can be looked at as not a team player, as not a part of the program, or whatever the case may be, and yet to still rise the ranks while living on both sides of that spectrum, to me is an achievement, because you actually have to be able to operate organically in who you are without the worry or concern of anyone else, putting on the blinders and just moving forward for whatever you feel the goal is. And so I respect that.
I think when we're talking about obstacles, I was going with Charlotte E. Ray. She was the first Black female lawyer in America. And the obstacles that she faced, she even faced the obstacle being a female going into Howard University Law School. So she went by the name C.E. Ray so that there would be no backlash off the top, so that she could get in. Because before then, whether it be female or Black, you had to not only live up to a certain standard, but there were certain depictions of people, whether they be male or female, also. Like, hey, that's not your job. You shouldn't be doing this. And that's still an obstacle today, because a lot of people listen to what others say about others. Like, I'm up here to bash women, or I'm up here to bash men. And we allow people to separate us or splinter us to where we can't really come together, because there's an animosity, instead of allowing us to realize that, hey, we're all in the same boat, and we need to roll this thing together so that we go in the same direction and lift one another up. And that's why I steer away from people who are separatists and people who are damning of other sexes and things of that sort, because it makes no sense if I'm trying to say we're trying to get somewhere at the same place at the same time.
Yeah. What year did she, if you don't mind, if you
Graduated 1872.
1872? Okay. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think when we start looking at these years mean something, right? It's one thing when we start talking about the 1870s as opposed to the 2020s. And I think it's important to understand that, sure, we have a lot more freedom to maneuver now. We get the benefit from their hard work. But when you start going back there, it's totally different. You start looking at, what is it, 1892 for Victor Green and 1898 for September Clark. That's the year that they were born, right? So you have to realize that a lot of their work took place in the 1900s era, so forth and so on. So when you start looking at some of the challenges that they've been through, I mean, let's look at, September Clark for starters. First and foremost, she was a woman in the early 1900s. That is monumental by itself. And then you tack on the fact of her skin color, that exacerbates the problem, right? Which they thought was a problem. So now you're looking at all of the work that she was trying to do and literally being blackballed, shut out, excluded, pushed aside, not just from people from different cultures, but in some cases, probably a lot of cases, from her own culture. Because you got to realize during that time it's still a male dominant society. In fact, when she started her doing some of her activist work, she got fired from being a teacher because she was too vocal about it. But that's what activists do. They're vocal about their work. So that was one of the reasons why we're asking about the Ali piece, right? Because it's kind of hard to fire the boxer from doing his job because that's what people come to see. They come to see him box. But for her, she's dependent upon teaching children because that's what she do. She gets paid from that, so forth and so on. So now when you start looking at some of those concerns, losing her job, being pulled from or being requested to go to Tennessee and start working on in a particular school system to help with the civil rights movement and being such a major player as she was, like you have to realize that she had to do like cheetah flips and do cartwheels just to get around some of these challenges, not necessarily stopping at the first hint of adversity. Okay, now let's go look at Victor Green. Uncle Junior, you asked a great question just now. How in the world did he get all this information? You know what I'm saying? He's a postal worker in New York. And he put together, and I'm gonna call it a black almanac. It's not really that, but really it is during that time. It is a book for black people to travel safely. Where does he get this information from? You didn't have the World Wide Web there. It's not like the people that work with him was pretty much open to say, hey, I know you black, but you can't go over there because no, they wouldn't tell him. They wasn't giving him information willingly. He had to go hunt the information. He had to figure it out for himself. He had to put it now, sure, because of his profession, he was witnessing some within New York, within the Harlem area. But what about outside of Harlem? What about so I think what ended up happening is that once they got word of it, you had other people in different areas that started doing the same thing, and then they came together. I can't say per se, but that's the only thing to me that actually makes sense. The challenges were insurmountable during those time frames. Just to kind of put this into context, my great great grandmother was born in 1919. So just kind of think about that. Like really, like you start talking about talking about overcoming, you didn't have a choice but to overcome or get swallowed up. So I think this is something that's worth talking about because remember last week we talked about these stories being lost in translation from generation to generation to generation. And for me, my goal now doing especially doing this conversation is trying to bring those stories back to the 2020s so that we can understand and realize that, you know what, we have a rich history that we don't talk a lot about. But I also believe when it comes down to our history, I think there might be a reason that we don't talk a lot about it. And I tend to call that historical erasure. Now, that said, and trust me, we got your comments in the chat. I'm going to come to them. But I kind of want to kind of feed off of this momentum that we got here. Gentlemen, why do you think that the contributions of some Black achievers have been historically erased? Okay, have been historically erased or marginalized in mainstream narratives?
I'll just bottom line it. If we found out just how powerful we were based off of our history, they wouldn't have the control that they have. It's all a control thing. We for some strange reason, are unaware of just how strong and how resilient and how powerful we are. So we get held under their thumb. It's a control thing, man. For real. It's a control thing. And it's a control thing because for some strange reason they think that if we empower ourselves, they are going to be erased. And when I say they, I'm not talking a specific race. I'm talking the powers that be. Period. If we actually understood just what we have and who we are and where we came from, the game would and actually believed it and actually took it into consideration instead of saying, oh, that was back then, this is now, the game would change. But that's just me looking at it from the outside, objectively speaking.
I'm a I get that, but I'm a also say that I think some of it is just certain things may not be known and may not get passed down. So let's take, for instance, Roland's family member that he was talking about. 100 years from now or 200 years from now, are Roland's kids and grandkids, are they going to pass on the information and the knowledge and share it with the world, that information? So I think sometimes things get lost with the next generation just because there are not certain conversations being had. Relationships may be broken to whereas we can't talk about certain things, or certain things are just not talked about. So I would say that some things um are just not passed down, because if you think about it, way back in the day, you look at our ancestors and stuff like this, even before there was like television and stuff like this, like a lot of us probably have some great leaders and some great influencer in our families way back, but we don't know about them because of those stories stop with grandma, or they stop with dad, but then dad wasn't around, you know what I mean, or mom died or something like that. So I think some of it is just life, and it's just things just not getting passed down from generation to generation. So I think that that's part of it too, in addition to some of the things that Christopher also said.
I could dig it. I think I'm gonna take a slightly different approach to it, right? Because I do believe that a part of the reason why we do have some of these stories today is because there were people who wouldn't let it die. And so it just took for the right people to hear it, to put it to a loudspeaker, right? So more of us can know these stories. But even to it being told today, I think the narratives are probably more skewed than what actually took place, right? Because we weren't there, so we don't know. We're only going off of what we see, hear, read. But I think and you know where I'm gonna go, so love me when I do this. When you don't know who you are, you never understand the narrative behind what is being done to you, right? And it's more than just somebody invented peanut butter or the traffic light, right? It goes deep into the heart of why did they specifically go search for your ancestors to kidnap out of Africa? Because they did. They searched specifically for a certain group, told them exactly where to go and kidnap people. And it's just coincidental that by your hands and by your work, they excel, right? Like Chris said, who's they? Not specific words, powers to be. All right, I'll stick with it. I like it, right? But the reason I believe that a lot of things have been suppressed in history is it's not the fact that I don't want you to know that you can create. Is I don't need you to see that you have created everything that has made us great. You are the backbone behind, and I'm not saying this to be boastful so we can run around here and say, yeah, we run the world. But the reality is having this specific group of people, right? Because look at the classification of people around the world. We're the only people without a true classification. We're not, they don't classify us as African until they called us African Americans. We're just Negroes. right? They search specifically for the Negroes. Not all Africans are Negroes, right? Just putting that out there. So, some homework for us to do if you want to, right? But when you realize that on your existence here on this land is what makes this place great, and when you realize that is when you start to understand your power, when you know who you are. And when you tie those two things together and you understand why everything you touch is great. As soon as you integrate into sports, that sport become great. As soon as you create a genre of music, it becomes great. And now people are getting surgery so they can start looking like y'all. I'm gonna leave that part alone. But this is just for me. I think it lies there. There's a greater lie being told, and in order to suppress that lie, I have to suppress the greatness or the influence to our greatness as a nation, and who we're really accredited to.
Man, y'all went deep on. I think one of the reasons that contribute to some of the
Hey, Roland,
information.
you
Hey,
didn't
man,
you didn't look at the private chat. I wanted to
yeah,
get a
let,
little
let me
quick
let, let me
alibi before you rock with it, if that's
yeah,
okay.
let me let him get in first before you start, bro, because I know you're gonna get cranking.
Who?
Yeah,
You.
let me let Unc get his alibi in first before you get started.
Yeah. So just everybody, we hit the private chat, but everybody didn't look at it. No shade, no disrespect, nothing like that. Hey, but no, I had an alibi. So kind of with the talking point and how some things don't necessarily get passed down because people may not pass the story along. I'm an educator, so I'm gonna go. I think some of these things are educational, right? If you look back at World War I, and some of us probably remember the Navajo code talkers, right? But like I would ask some kids in school and they have no idea about it. So it's like certain things have been taken out, or certain things may not be as up to date or as it's almost like, do we really need that information anymore? You know what I mean? So when they're putting information into the history books, they can only put a certain amount of information in there. So at some point, we have to, someone makes a decision to take certain things out. So when you take certain things out, you have to put newer, sometimes up to date, more history in there. So I think some of the reason why it may look like certain things are going away is just because schools and education are choosing to take certain things out. And that's why we hear, and certain things they leave in. That's why we hear Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. We hear the same people every single February. So I think, like I said, I think some of it is just they take certain things out because they can't put everything in the books. So I think some of the information is not getting passed down to the children through the education field.
Okay.
I respect that view. I totally disagree, but because I think you're in the education field, so you understand a little bit on that. But me coming from, I guess, my studies when it comes to before integration, inventions were made by people and patents were designed and paid for by people who had power. But inventions were made by those who wanted an easier life, like Eli Whitney and the cotton gin. It was so he wouldn't be out there picking cotton and so forth and so on. Or Henry Ford and the motor. It didn't necessarily come from him, but it came from somebody. If you got the money to take from somebody else, then you can have your name on things and you can get the notoriety. When it comes to education, when it comes to the books and so forth, the information you take out, you still ain't took out that Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Didn't it happen, but he didn't even touch foot over in America. Didn't take that out. But you will take out the achievements of said Black people. You would take out the achievements that allow me to look at another person and say, man, if they can do it, I can do it. So I look at it as more of a political thing. And that's why they want to take out of schools, the school system now. They want to take out everything. But I know once I came to Texas and went to any Texas school, one class they do have is Texas history. It's a class. If you go to college in Texas, you got to take Texas history. They ensure you take Texas history. And since integration happened, what happens is now our people, they say, hey, we made it. We can go to their schools. We can be at their jobs. So what we did, we left ours alone because we didn't want to stick out. We didn't want to stand out. So the parents, the grandparents, they stopped telling the stories. They stopped telling about the mission. They stopped telling about what got us there. If you ever been to Selma, Alabama, and you go across I don't even know if it's called the Edmund Pettus Bridge, because that's what it was called, the Edmund Pettus Bridge. At the end of the bridge is a museum. And that's the same museum that they went for so that they can get their voters' rights and voters' registration cards and everything going down at the base of the bridge. On this side of that bridge, the community looks like hell. On the other side of the bridge, the community is well-to-do. Now they're starting the gentrification process, but it's all a political thing when it comes to our endeavors that we want to push forward, because we can stop talking about it. And then, or if we continue to talk about it, oh, he's an angry black man. I'm not angry at all. I just like to be knowledgeable about what we've gone through so that we won't go through it anymore.
Yeah, I like. So I'm liking everything I'm hearing, and I find it hard, and I'm not trying to disagree with anybody. I'm accepting what everybody's actually saying because I know within the confines of everything that was actually saying, there are variations of truths in there, variation of facts as well. Um, but I kind of want to go back to the stories, the conversations that take place within the comforts of our community. Um, I look at certain people, and I know certain people who have that rich family history to where Big Mama did share some stories. Papa did share some stories. And those stories kind of shared with them what it was like to live during that era. Well, like I told you, my great grandmother was born in 1919. During her, every now and then, I would get the glimpse of some stories that she would share. And so, what I'm saying is that it has to come to a point for us not to depend on the books to carry our legacy forward. It has to become something that we actually put on our back, and it becomes a part of who we are simply because we refuse to let it die. And so, going back to all your reasons, I don't disagree with anything that anyone said because I think within the scope of everything that was said, we get more closer to the truth. I'm agreeing with everybody. Um, and to Garfield points, I'm agreeing with that as well. And it's too easy for me to say, but right, but it's too easy for me to say, but make the books bigger, make the class longer, do more, say stop taking us out of it. But again, I'm not in a position to where I actively make those decisions, right? I'm not in a position to where I advise the people who make those decisions, right? But then there's a number of different angles that we can look at this question from. And all of it points to the end state of one thing: it ain't there. That's, to me, that's the most important thing. It's not there. And if it's not there, how does, my grandson get the information? How does our great grandchildren get that information if we don't take responsibility for ourselves to ensure that we're talking about, Victor Green, that we're talking about, brother, I forgot the young lady you mentioned. What's her name again? You're muted.
Oh, Charlotte E. Ray.
Charlotte E. Ray, yeah. We're talking about Charlotte E. Ray. We're talking about Dick Gregory. We're talking about Muhammad Ali. We're talking about Pamela E. Smith. We're talking about Marv Neal. We're talking about Septima Clark. We're talking about these people. These are conversations that we're having, which makes them curious to go research. That's the point that I'm really wanting everybody to understand and drive home. Sure, I can read 17 books back here and learn something new about, like, case in point, this young lady right here, right? Awesome, awesome throughout her years. But if you never lived during her tenure, if you never seen the magic that she created on the big screen, then you will never get to witness who she is unless you stumble across some black and white movie. And if you was like me, I can't stand black and white movies. When I see black and white movies, I automatically shut down just simply because it's black and white, and I don't think it's good. But let me tell you something. Cicely Tyson, amazing actress, amazing. So that these are the things that I'm talking about. We have to be the ones, the generation, right? And the boomers who are still alive. We have to be the one that work in concert with one another to where we help carry that legacy forward. That we won't let it die. It becomes a part of who we are. Because if I can break you down from the outside in, then I'm winning the war. It's a longer process that way. But here's the deal: from the outside in is how you believe the world sees you. So if you believe I see you in a certain light, then the inside out. Here's the deal: the inside will slowly start to deteriorate because you'll be so concerned about what's going on the outside that you won't even focus on what you put on the inside. So that's the point I want to go with that because, man, a lot of great information that we're hearing tonight, a lot of great talking points. But if we just allow these talking points to die, we're really missing the mark of what Black History Month, and I got to keep doing it every time I say it, is all about. I think we need to make every Friday Black Friday, not just shopping. Anyway, moving on, moving on to the next question, right? How can, and I kind of touched on it already, so I apologize if I got a little long winded. How can acknowledging and rectifying the historical and racial of Black achievements contribute to a more inclusive and accurate representation of history? And I'm going to be quiet on this one because I talk too much.
I would defer to y'all because I think this is above my pay grade.
I mean, this is it seems simplistic of a question, but it's I don't think there's really a simplistic answer, right? Rectifying the historical erasure of Black achievements and contribute to a more inclusive and accurate representation of history. And the reality is receiving it, and and kind of like you said, I think you partially answered the question yourself, Coach. Is we have to do the work in the kitchen at the dinner table, tell these stories, do the research. um I wrote down a couple of names but that I saw in the chat. I was like, I could ask y'all after the show, and if I didn't catch any names, right? But but let's read these stories, let's know these stories, and let's tell these stories. Because at the end of the day, I think the problem is, and maybe this is just my feelings, right? I understand a bit the system in which we live, and I understand its intent, right? Because I don't think inclusion comes until brokenness happens in the system, right? uh it was okay to integrate after destroying hundreds of successful communities, and most of the communities struggling, you know. And then when you integrate and you create civil rights, you also create this idea of, well, I give assistance to the woman during the civil rights era if we destroy the family structure. Like, anyway, but so I think to look to the system, to look to someone that doesn't really understand the struggle from the perspective of the people, is it'll never be the way we want it unless we are able to completely control the narrative. So I think the work has to be done at home. I said all that just to say that.
Ooh, this one here is something. I think when it comes to stop worrying about people's feelings. For real, because people are worried, well, my kids gonna think that their grandparents, and I don't care about that. It's just like when I had it. Like I don't tell if my grandkids or kids ever say something about some doggone Santa Claus. I always told them I'm not gonna lie to you, because if I lie to you, it's gonna hurt worse when I got to tell you the truth. So in this instance, when it comes to achievements, accolades, and historical facts, you got to put the truth out there. You can't just put stuff out there and make it seem like these were good people. Like a few years ago, the Board of Education in Texas, the state of Texas, changed the historical content of slavery to where they were just indentured servants. They had a good old time singing and dancing in the fields in the heat. They made that truth. So now these next generations that come forward gonna be like, oh, it wasn't that bad, because they were singing and dancing and stuff like that. No, when you erase a culture's benefit, when you say that these people, their only benefit is they came out of slavery, now that's the only thing black people can say today. We made it out of slavery. Okay, what happened before slavery? What happened during slavery? What happened? If you think slave, oh, I was a slave, my people were slave, that's what you attach yourself to in the back of your mind, like, okay, this is my start. No, this is not my start. And I don't go to the other end where people say, well, we were all kings and queens. No, you wouldn't. That's asinine to even think it was, because if it's only one king at a time, somebody had to be a peasant. Somebody had to be a worker bee. So when it comes to this, stop worrying about people's feelings, put the truth out, and state facts, and let everything else come out in the wash. Because when it comes down to it, if we're going to say what the facts are, then I don't have to say, well, what about him? He had slaves too. Okay, this dude was trash. I'm not going to say, oh, he's a forefather, so I'm supposed to be this patriotic person who lifts all these people who were beating and doing all these demonstrative things to people. I'm not gonna say, oh, they were good people because they did some good things. Because if I do that, I gotta say, well, Hitler did some good things, and then they not gonna like it when I go that route. So state facts and let people's feelings be in their back pocket, and I think we'll all get along after that.
Great point. Bring the question back up, please. Thank you.
How can acknowledging and rectifying the historical erasure of Black achievement contribute to a more inclusive and accurate representation of history? So here's what's going on in my little brain. All right, so let's say, for instance, 300 years ago, all 5 of us men, our grandfathers, all worked together. Let's say, for argument's sake, on the same plantation, right? And then maybe some of them had some achievements and different things going on like that. Well, as of 2024, we may not know those stories, right? So if we were able to acknowledge or either understand or even have the information about those, that may help us not necessarily get along better, but we may be able to connect more dots, and we may be able to have, more like, hey, I got this in common with this person. I got this in common with this person. I think it can help unify us, especially when we have certain things in common. 'Cause I think people like to be kind of tribal. So I think that if you know certain more things about what happened in your past, I think those things can help you today. And I think also it can give you a more accurate representation, because now if me and Roland are talking about what happened to his great great grandfather, and then now it's a similar story of something with Chris' grandfather, you know what I mean? It's now we can connect more dots, and we can have a lot more accurate representation of exactly what went on back then. We don't have to look through the educational books and look through the lies and different things like that. We can know from the information and the stories that was passed down exactly what went on back then. So I just think overall, just having more information and having more information just to be able to connect those dots just makes for a lot better, accurate representation of what exactly went on back then.
Absolutely. I love it. Did everybody give a response first? I want to make sure before I press forward. Okay. Um, I agree. I think for the most part, we have to conclude that this is the very definition of what we call difficult conversation. And I'm agreeing with Roland. Like, this ain't the time for me to put my feelings on the table. This is the time for me to be open, honest, and articulate, right? Articulate about what we understand the facts to be based upon what we see the facts that are being presented. And then we start having conversations with people who actually look like us and understand us. We have that conversation, and then we show up in numbers, not in an aggressive sense, but in a kind of like, and I hate to use this term, but it's more so like a political sense, more so like a conversational style, so that we can have a conversation about how we can fix this thing so it can look more right, so it can get closer to what right was, what history really was, not what his story is, but what history is supposed to be, right? It needs to represent an inclusive nature of all people, not just one person, one group of people being dominant and marginalize every other group of people, and given the picture that this history is built on the backs of this people, but you two people are just along for the ride. When we understand that it was not that way. There was a question I want to. It kind of got lost in the. There we go. Do you think the great migration of blacks from the South to the North helped or hurt our erasure or marginalization of our history? That's a good question. I like that.
Both. It helped in a sense that some were able to escape the perils of their situation in the South, only to go up north and receive similar treatment, but it wasn't legal to have them in legal chains and bonds. But I think that, and it separated families, it separated cultures, it separated us from one another in a sense to where now we look at, oh, the haves and the have-nots, or the house and the field, or that mentality was able to be pushed, and that narrative was able to be pushed. So now, because we speak closer to the Queen's English, and they would speak somewhat of a non-Queen's English, then we look down on one another. We look down on one another either for making it, or it allowed us to perpetuate that crab in the barrel mentality also. But it was some great things that came from it, because if you look at your HBCUs, majority of them are all in the South. I think, like for me, the closest one to me was one of my sisters went to Wilberforce or Central State in Ohio, and then you have in Delaware. But when you look at your colleges, they came from penny funds through the Black church. So all of them came from donations and so forth, because they knew education was our way out. Now we out our way of education.
I like it. Any other thoughts?
I totally agree. I think
Yeah.
I think sometimes we look for an answer, but one thing that Roland said that always permeates with me when I hear it is the separation of the people. And I think the more separated we are, and I mean, the wolf comes to scatter the sheep. Why? Then I can attack each sheep one by one, you know, and however you want to view it. But I think when you look at the conversation, most people hate to have this conversation or what have you, but there's only one community that is taught to separate from itself to be considered successful, you know, and so that separation and that question actually makes me think, like, is this the true start of that idea? you know the run to the north to gain freedom, or to gain from the Jim Crow era or the black codes, or you come to the North, and now that you have a separation between blacks in the North and blacks in the South, now there's a whole nother level of division I can create, because the North say them Southerners are not smart, you know, and the South will say, oh, them Northerners, them city slickers, them Yankees, you know, they come down here and get, and so they couldn't survive down here in the country. So you have that divide in between our community even there. So how I think that brings up a greater question is, with us being so spread out, how do we come together with one mind so we can start to speak the same thing and do the same thing, so we can help strengthen the community, because I think that would help with disparities, what talking about our histories, but even in our communities.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all points. Again, a lot of this, and we understand that a lot of this was like survival moves. So we understand how this actually came to place. But then, by that same token, I think we also need to conclude that within the scope of this great migration that took place, there was a lot of conditioning that had already pre-existed. So the pre-existing conditioning that went along with the migration, I have to conclude that in some particular shape, form, or fashion, that it contributed to, like Roland said, both, right? It contributed to helping the erasure, but it also hurt it as well. But then going back to what I said previously, I think at some point you have to realize that within the scope of these families, what type of conversations took place about the things that existed. Because I remember growing up, there were certain things that were shared with me, and those things were shared from the perspective of the fear that my mother had of something happening to me. So I think those conversations probably took place more than like therefore, conversations about their forefathers, so forth and so on. Again, fast forward, now being separate is a way of life. Now talking about survival is more so of a way of life. And it's not as bad. I can't really say that, because again, we're still seeing it happen. Not so much as to the large degree that it was happening, but it still happened. So you still have, mothers out there who are fearful for their sons. You have fathers out there who are fearful for their sons and things of that nature. I know I mentioned probably last year, 2 years ago, that I had to have a heart-to-heart conversation with my son. Like, look, if you go out there and you get pulled over, be quiet, do what is asked of you, get home. That's all you got. If you just get home, we'll fix everything else. Do not get caught up in a situation to where this right here gets you in a situation that you cannot get out of. Because what I cannot do is replace you. We can fix everything afterwards, but don't be put in that situation. So again, the conversation, in my opinion, although there were different types of conversations, I believe was then that took place then, I still believe the same conversations happen right now, still today. But great question, Adrian, and I thank you, gentlemen, for adding your insights as pertaining to it. Look, we're got about 5 minutes left. I kind of want to just go ahead and dive into our final thoughts. Chris, we're gonna start with you, bro. Then we're gonna go from you to Uncle Junior, then from Uncle Junior to Gadded, and Gadded to Roland. Then I just probably close it out. But I guarantee you, by the time I get there, I ain't gonna have nothing to say. So that being said, Chris, bro, you got the floor.
I guess my final thoughts are my final thought is simple. We have a very, very rich history that we really need to dive into, so that way we can learn about us and figure out what we are and move forward instead of going along with whatever narrative is pinned on us. We, as I hate to say black, but I guess that's the topic. So we as black people have done some amazing things and uh, overcome some obstacles that were thought to be insurmountable at the time, but we still overcame it anyway. Like we're stronger than our history is richer than what we are being taught. Um, and I'm gonna talk to the OGs. It is time for you to dive into your history and start teaching it to the youth so that way they can understand that they are more than what they are and they can be more than what we have become. That's my final thought.
Been a lot of interesting things that have been shared tonight. I, for one, will start by saying is that I did not grow up learning a lot about the Black history. Even as an adult, being in the military, it's just something that, but no, not any negative reason. It was just something that I never really got into. Um, but I will say that I think that it is important to know my history and to understand and look back at some of the achievements that my ancestors may have accomplished. I think those things are important. I think that that's important for something as simple as my name. My last name is Martin. Looking back on some of the great Martins in my history and some of the things that they have achieved in their life, and how can some of these achievements that have been created by my people, by Black people, and how can I use that to benefit me or to help other people going forward? So I think that, something similar to what Chris said, I think it is important that we reach back in time and kind of learn more about where we came from and the truth about where we came from, not just information. You know what I mean? I think it's good. I think it's a good idea to learn information and be able to regurgitate it or to pass it along to somebody else and see how it may be able to help him. Good, bad, or indifferent. Look at how many people, young men, when they saw, like I said, good, bad, or indifferent, however you felt about President Barack Obama, but just sometimes having people in a certain position can, um, what's the word? It can sometimes give people hope, or it can sometimes be that seed that's planted that can eventually grow into something big. So I think it's a great idea to look back into history, be able to pull something out, and then, like Chris said, be able to move forward at the same time. So that's my final thought.
Whew, man, I love this conversation. And I just believe that knowing what we know about history, or our history, right, and the suppression of stories throughout time. And I think I learned it these last few years not to just read and find one narrative, right? We have to go and start finding these stories and and researching, try to find some old newspaper articles about the times and the cities that we know are connected to these stories, and dig deep if you're really interested in it. Like I like history, not just from the narrative of Black history, because what we call Black history is tied into all of world history, right? So I think it's good to go and research, get more than one resource on the information, and then let's share the story and the informations that we've learned, um, and let's move forward and let's grow, right? Let's stop just being an individual, and let's get back to being a people. That's all I got.
I'm almost like Coach at a loss for words, but I think that it's important to to learn who you are, what you're made of. Like I've always been proud because my grandfather he went to Morehouse, he taught at Morehouse, and he was a Morehouse man, and so that's been instilled in me to be proud of that. And that's just like anything. When I go to family reunions, I see people and I can learn from, and I say, man, you're doing this and you're doing that. When I come here, I see people who are striving to be better, striving to be something. So it's not that I have to find someone in the past to look up to. It's not like I got to find somebody in a certain office to look up to, because when I look at whomever's on here, when you're trying to do better, you're trying to lift up your people, that's a positive for me, because I am proud of who I am, and I'm proud to uplift and acknowledge people that not only look like me, but strive to do better things than me. I think we are the only culture who will get looked down on when we uplift one another, but we are celebrated when we tear one another down. So I'm of the thought that it's my job to never let that happen around me. When I used to have soldiers that would come in the military and they would be moving a certain way, as their leader, I would say, hey, you can be loud or ignorant, never be both at the same time. Because other people look at you, other people will judge you, other people don't understand this. So the way you move, the way you carry yourself, it reflects on everyone else. And I'm not saying you have to switch up and change and be like somebody else, but read the room and know where you are. That's where we have to read every room that we walk into to see how can I benefit this room so that they can take me seriously and realize that I add value simply by my presence. That's all.
Yeah, man, you're right. I knew that they would leave very little on the table for me, and that's fine. That's one of the reasons why they're here with me, and I appreciate all their perspectives. Um, I think when we go back and listen to and analyze this conversation, it was important for us. And again, I remind you of the goal. The goal was to kind of reach back and grab some of our historical heroes and bring them forward, not the ones that the media purports for years and years and years. Sure, we hear about Martin Luther King. Sure, we hear about Malcolm X. Right, we hear about the mainstream. But what about the people who are behind the scenes? What about the people who did a lot of great work but never got the recognition for the work that they did? I think that was the goal for this particular conversation. If you go back and take a look at it, I think we more than did that. We did that by discussing. Sure, we talked about Muhammad Ali. We talked about Pamela A. Smith. We talked about Dick Gregory. We talked about Marv Neal. We talked about Victor Green. We talked about Septima Clark, right? Understanding some of their contributions um, and what they did in years ago under conditions that were unsurmountable, conditions that, if in most cases some of us were placed in those conditions, would probably fold. I think it's worth us researching and understanding and becoming aware so we can bring their legacy forward so that we as a culture understand exactly who we are, understand how rich our culture really goes, how deep it goes. Like you're not just a surface level person that people have been trying to tell you that you work for years. It is important for you to understand the rich lineage in which you come from. Even in the face of adversity, we still found a way to actually do what actually was good for the entire community. And if we can find a way to do that, if we can find a way to bring those stories forward, share those stories with our children, like with my grandson, so forth and so on. If we can do those things, sharing those stories and keeping them going on over and over again and not allowing anybody to erase it, I think what you'll find is that we can get to the point as a culture to where we can have the desire to heal. I can't stress that I can't stress that point enough. We have to have the desire to unite. And the struggle for me is that I look around and I'm hard pressed trying to find that. I'm hard pressed trying to find people who want to come together and unify for the sake of solidarity and uplifting our community. So, that being said, I greatly appreciate everybody who joined us. I greatly appreciate everybody in the chats. I greatly appreciate everybody, all my panel members, man. You guys are awesome. And again, you're all welcome to come back. Come back. Again, come back. We welcome each and every last one. I don't care who you are. Come back because this is a place that we desire to grow. This is a place that we desire to be a beacon for our community. So that being said, allow the best version to be the best version of you to be the blessed version that somebody else encounter. Again, go to totalmindsetshift.com, become a member of the community where we carry on conversations like this. We have uplifting conversations. We have conversations of growth. So that being said, on behalf of these fine young men, have a great rest of their evening. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you guys next Friday night at 8 p.m. on the Hearts of Men podcast.